Hello, I'm Nick. Welcome to GeoX, Global Intelligence. Note, if you enjoy unbiased geopolitical and military analysis, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Now, let's get started. Russian forces are now reaching the outskirts of Kramatorsk. NATO aircraft stationed in the Baltic states have been placed on combat readiness. Meanwhile, another flare-up of fighting in the Persian Gulf is once again pushing oil prices higher. These and other geopolitical developments are what I'll be covering today. On the Russian-Ukrainian front, the situation continues to deteriorate. For Ukraine, despite the ongoing triumph in social media, the news cycle, and political messaging, reality on the ground looks very different. Reports indicate that after capturing the area near Druzhkivka, Russian forces pushed forward reconnaissance and sabotage units that have already been spotted roughly 2 miles from Kramatorsk. In practical terms, Russian troops are now reaching the outskirts of the city. No, this does not mean the assault on Kramatorsk has begun. Calm down. It also does not mean Russian troops will be fighting in the streets tomorrow. Let me remind you that Russian reconnaissance groups were driving around Druzhkivka and filming videos nearly a year and a half ago. Yet the city is still under Ukrainian control. I also want to clarify something. When I use the term reconnaissance and sabotage group, I mean exactly that. These are units sent deep behind enemy lines to conduct reconnaissance, create disruption, destroy infrastructure, capture prisoners for intelligence, or carry out special missions, what many uninformed journalists casually call recon groups. On the front lines usually have nothing to do with actual reconnaissance units. Most of the time, they're simply heavy frontline infantry advancing in very small assault formations. They're what I previously described as two-man assault teams. Those are completely different formations. They are not reconnaissance and sabotage groups. Journalists often throw these terms around without understanding the difference. I don't do that here. So yes, what we're seeing around Kramatorsk are genuine reconnaissance and sabotage groups. At the same time, the main Russian frontline positions are already only about 6 to 7 miles from the city, which is now coming under regular tube artillery fire. At the same time, Russian reconnaissance and sabotage teams have also been spotted near Sloviansk, inside the grounds of the former Sloviansk power plant. It's still unclear exactly what's happening there. This could be an attempt to seize a key position with advanced elements before the main force arrives. It could be reconnaissance in force, or it may simply be intelligence gathering. We'll have to wait and see. One thing is obvious. Ukraine cannot simply abandon those industrial facilities around the power plant. If Russian forces establish themselves there, drone operators will move in, logistics hubs will follow, and the entire battlefield around Sloviansk will become much more dangerous for Ukraine. In any case, what we're seeing is a continued Russian offensive into the Donbass from the east. They're no longer waiting for operations around Lyman and Kostiantynivka to produce decisive results. Russian advance units are already reaching the outskirts of the last two major urban centers in northwestern Donbass that remain under Ukrainian control. Meanwhile, the situation around both Kostiantynivka and Lyman appears increasingly favorable for the Russian military. Reports from the Lyman sector indicate that one of Ukraine's territorial defense brigades was effectively destroyed after being left without adequate support. The surviving soldiers are openly accusing their own command of abandoning them. They say they were simply left to fight alone. Some reports even identify the unit as Ukraine's 120th Territorial Defense Brigade. Of course, fear and confusion often exaggerate battlefield reports. Still, we've repeatedly concluded through our own analysis that the situation around Lyman has become extremely difficult. Ukraine's Third Corps is no longer capable of mounting a serious defense of the city. Most of its combat strength has already been pulled back toward the western bank of the Siversky Donets River. There are still several settlements there, along with wooded terrain that offers defensive opportunities. The real problem isn't whether those positions can be defended. The problem is supplying them. Logistics in that area have become extremely difficult, and without supplies, every military force eventually reaches its limit. That's why abandoning the eastern bank and withdrawing to the western side has long been the operationally sound decision. But political considerations appear to be overriding military logic. As a result, soldiers will likely Continue dying there until those positions are finally overrun. That is precisely what Russian command appears to be counting on. Their objective is to grind down Ukraine's best troops while they remain trapped on the eastern bank, where Russia enjoys a significant operational advantage. They can gradually isolate those forces from their supply lines and destroy them methodically. Reports have also surfaced regarding Russia's plans once the Ukrainian bridgehead east of the Oskil River near Kupiansk is eliminated. According to those reports, the 1st Guards Tank Army could then be redeployed to another sector. Once operations around the Oskil are complete, there will be little left for that formation to accomplish there. Attempting a direct assault across the river toward the fortified positions around Zarikin would be an extremely costly operation. The terrain strongly favors the defenders. Those defensive lines have been prepared for a long time. Launching a frontal attack there makes very little military sense. That's exactly what I've been saying all along. Defending isolated bridgeheads under these conditions is a military concept that only Zelensky's leadership could have come up with. It's reminiscent of his so-called peace summit, where officials gathered at taxpayers' expense to drink coffee while discussing peace between Ukraine and Russia without Russia even being present. A remarkable display of diplomacy. After alienating neighboring countries and damaging multiple channels of cooperation with the United States, Ukraine's leadership continues to present this as successful policy. For a country fighting Russia, that's an extraordinary approach, as if Russia were some insignificant regional power that could be defeated with a single battalion. That was always the illusion. It's easy to joke endlessly about what I consider to be Zelensky's mistakes, but unfortunately, those mistakes are paid for with the lives of experienced Ukrainian soldiers. Ukraine doesn't have many veterans left. Those are precisely the troops that should be holding the most vulnerable sectors of the front. Instead, they're being sacrificed defending bridgeheads that will almost certainly have to be abandoned sooner or later. That's why I believe the situation around Lyman has become practically hopeless for Ukraine. As for Kostiantynivka, the media campaign surrounding that city has been astonishing. As someone who once worked extensively in political public relations, both positive and negative, I find the entire spectacle difficult to watch. Frankly, it's unpleasant. I see exactly how these narratives are constructed, and I have no desire to dig through that machinery anymore. Still, the information campaign surrounding Kostiantynivka during the NATO summit reached an extraordinary level. Yet despite all that publicity, Ukraine has effectively lost control of the city. New reports claim that Ukrainian command launched battalions into near-suicidal attacks simply to break into parts of Kostiantynivka long enough to film videos. In other words, public relations operations disguised as military offensives. The result was hundreds of casualties, shattered battalions, and continued Russian advances. Russian forces are no longer just approaching Druzhkivka. They're already advancing toward Druzhkivka itself. Russian forces are bypassing the area from the south, while additional pressure can also develop from the Pokrovsk direction. The distance to Druzhkivka is now relatively short. As a result, the Ukrainian command's efforts to create political optics so Zelensky could present a stronger image during discussions with Trump ended in yet another costly battlefield setback. That's what I call a public relations war. It's one of the defining characteristics of this conflict today. The war is being fought on TikTok. It's being fought on Telegram. It's being fought on YouTube. It's being fought on television. But the real war is still decided the same way it always has been. In the trenches, on the ground. Everything else is just noise. Unfortunately, people continue to die because of that noise. After its defeat around Kostiantynivka, Ukrainian forces are now falling back toward Druzhkivka. It appears Russia may eventually attempt to capture Druzhkivka from two different directions. They may not even spend significant resources trying to seize Druzhkivka first. We'll see how events unfold. For now, the overall situation remains extremely difficult. Further north, where Russian forces continue advancing through the Kharkiv region, Ukraine is facing another critical situation. Russian troops are now approaching Veliky Berlik from three directions. This is the last major defensive stronghold Ukraine still holds across the eastern part of Kharkiv Oblast. If it falls, Ukraine may be forced to abandon a vast surrounding area. I've always found these endless discussions about who captured another few square kilometers rather strange. How will those statistics matter if the overall operational situation continues deteriorating? How will anyone keep talking about victories when reality on the battlefield looks like this? The answer is simple. Ukraine doesn't have enough troops there. That's the core problem. Russian forces are attacking with relatively modest numbers, yet they're operating across a broad front. Fighting is already taking place inside Velikiy Berlik itself, along its outskirts, and in nearby villages. It's an extremely difficult position for Ukraine. What interests me now is how the Ukrainian command intends to get itself out of this situation. There are also important developments coming from the Zaporizhzhia front, particularly around Mala-Tokmachka. Ukraine turned that settlement into a media symbol. In my view, that was a mistake. The town itself is neither strategically exceptional nor worthy of the attention it's receiving. If Russia captures Mala-Tokmachka, Orikhiv will likely follow. Just be patient. The battlefield is changing rapidly. Once Russia's Vostok Group finishes dealing with Ukraine's latest attacks in the north, it will likely resume its westward advance. Ultimately, the real issue isn't Mala-Tokmachka. It's Orikhiv.